Well, good morning, everyone. I can still say good morning. I'm about to take you from the parts per trillion world in the most immediate impact to someone's homeowner and blow it up to the thousands and billions of pounds world. Kind of that big picture of what's happening with the Chesapeake Bay program right now, because I know that's a question that a lot of people have. What's going on at the regional scale and with the partnership that we have on meeting our water quality goals as an entire watershed? That was a great background on who I am, so I'll just move right along into who the Chesapeake Bay Commission is. I control the slides. Perfect, okay. So the Chesapeake Bay Commission, for those unfamiliar, we are a tri-state legislative body that was created by Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Maryland in the 1980s, enacted into state law. Our purpose is to help those legislatures tackle issues of common concern to all three states when it comes to the Chesapeake Bay and the watershed. We promote intergovernmental cooperation where that is needed. We promote coordinated policies. We try to bring the science and make sure that the science meets the policy and pushes the entire region forward. Interestingly, we are a signatory to every Chesapeake Bay agreement that has been signed since 1983, and we are a full partner in the Chesapeake Bay program. Our membership is drawn from those three states: Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. We have 7 members from each of those states. 5 of them are state legislatures, so 3 members of the House, 2 members of the state Senate. 1 person is nominated by the governor, usually a Secretary of Natural Resources, or in this case, we have Director Andrew Wheeler in Virginia, and we have 1 citizen member. So those folks are the ones that come together to push the commission forward and to advise their colleagues in those legislatures on what to do to move the needle on Chesapeake Bay restoration. What's great about the commission is we work across party lines. We work across state lines. We work between state and house, state senates and state houses, which is something you don't always see. So it's a really collegial atmosphere, and it's really what enables us to push forward. So just a reminder on the Chesapeake Bay program. The signatories are the 6 states within the watershed and the District of Columbia. EPA on behalf of all the core federal agencies that support the Chesapeake Bay program, and the Chesapeake Bay Commission, as I mentioned. The commission is the only legislative voice in the program. All of the other signatories represent or are the executives. So we offer a different sort of voice, a different sort of perspective into the program, and that's a pretty critical one, particularly because we are advisors to U.S. Congress. So we speak to the legislators in D.C. on a peer-to-peer almost way of engaging. So we understand some of the concerns and some of the balances they're making at the federal level because our folks are making them at the state level, which really helps us to be effective. So the current Chesapeake Watershed Agreement that we are in was signed in 2014, and it has one vision for the Chesapeake Bay that we've all agreed to as the signatories, 10 interrelated goals across that to pull us towards that vision, and 31 measurable time-bound outcomes spanning across those 10 goals. Many of those goals and outcomes include targeted deadlines that we arrive at in 2025. That includes the water quality goal, which is tied to the pollution reductions that are called for in the Chesapeake Bay total maximum daily load. And that is why there's so much talk about what are we going to do as a program, as a partnership, as we approach 2025 and as we go beyond 2025. It's time to assess where we are, where we're likely to be when we hit 2025, and then what's that gap between where we're going to be and where we thought we would be or where we wanted to be, and how are we going to close that gap? Okay, so this question is what prompted the Executive Council, those signatories that I just spoke about, during their 2022 annual meeting to charge their principal staff with recommending a critical path forward that takes into consideration all of the new science that's now available, the restoration strategies that we have and that we're developing, as well as the new and growing challenges that we as a watershed are facing, everything from climate change to growth. And that charge that the executives gave their principal staff has 2 components. Give us recommendations on how to accelerate our progress between now and 2025, because we're still pushing forward on all the plans that we put in place. And report that back to us at the coming annual meeting in October. And then give us recommendations for the continuation of our partnership beyond 2025. How are we going to continue to work together and make progress after these deadlines hit? So that's kind of hard to see, but the yellow sentence and the orange sentence kind of split those two tasks. So I'm going to start with the first one, which was, what are we going to do to accelerate progress reaching 2025? A steering committee was formed earlier this year to figure out how we're going to reach those recommendations and put together something for the Executive Council of the Chesapeake program to really consider. They formed a drafting team, and NOAA's former Chesapeake Bay Director, Sean Corson, kind of steered the ship on drafting the report. They solicited information from all of the leads across those 31 outcomes. So how is your outcome doing? Tell us, what are your challenges? What are your opportunities as we approach 2025? And then they pulled all of that together into an 85-page draft report, which you're welcome to take a look at. But I'm going to give you a quick idea of what's included in that, in case you want to poke around and find parts that are most interesting to you. That report is called Charting a Course to 2025. So there's an executive summary that kind of pulls together the process. There are high-level recommendations. There's 4 detailed sections on the Chesapeake Bay total maximum daily load and our phase 3 watershed implementation plans, on the emerging science, monitoring, and analysis that's happening, on climate change and diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, and then on 2 priority outcomes, forest buffers and wetlands, that we know are critical to us ever reaching our goals as a watershed. The report also goes through all of those outcomes and lists what kind of the feedback that they received from those leads. How are we doing on each of those outcomes? What are the challenges that they're facing, the headwinds, and what do they see as opportunities moving forward? That whole report was released for public comment in July for 30 days, and they received 391 comments that they are parsing through right now. The drafting team, they're working through those comments. They're figuring out what recommendations are needed or what actions need to be taken to move those comments forward, and they're going to respond to those comments, to each of those comments. That's a lot of work to be done, and as I said, the Executive Council is meeting in October, so we won't see a final report kind of put on the desk in October. What we're going to see is those high-level recommendations and a second draft, hopefully, of what the drafting team has come up with based on the feedback that they've received. You're not going to be able to see this. It's very small, but this is a table that you'll find in that report, and it goes through all of the outcomes and says whether we are on track, off course, or uncertain. And the point of that exercise is kind of to say there's a lot of progress that we have made together as a partnership, and they've pulled out a couple of really great examples of that. For fish passage as an outcome, we have opened 619 stream miles every 2 years, which exceeds the target of 132 stream miles that we had hoped for. For oysters, we set aside 10 tributaries that we wanted to do restoration. We've completed 7, and we also added an 11th tributary to the mix. So a lot of progress being made there. And on public access, we have added 231 access sites completed out of the 300 that we had set as our goal, averaging about 21 new sites per year. There's some places where we're uncertain. Healthy watershed outcome and stewardship outcome are listed as uncertainties, and that's pending some additional analysis or data that those outcomes and goal teams are working on. But then the big thing that everyone's talking about is where we're off course. For the 2025 watershed implementation outcomes, those are kind of the big focus for everyone, at least in the news and in the reporting. Our goals, based on our goals in the total maximum daily load, we have hit 49% of our nitrogen goal, 64% of our phosphorus goal, and 100% of our sediment goal. So making a lot of progress, but not where we wanted to be. But what's important to remember is that we are making that progress even as the population in our region is growing, the number of animals in our region is growing, the intensity or density of agriculture is increasing. Our farmers are being asked to do more, produce more on fewer acres. So all of that is changing, that land use is changing. And we're still making progress. We are still, as a community, pulling pollution out of our system before it reaches the bay. A couple other places where we're off course and really focused: forest buffers and wetlands. Like I said, those are those two priorities that they identified as places where we really need to move the needle if we're going to reach our vision. Our goal for forest buffers is 900 miles per year, and we're at less than 10% of that goal. And on wetlands, our goal is 85,000 acres, and we're at less than 20,000 acres. So places where we really need to figure out how do we accelerate progress. So this is the path forward through 2025. And part of this, I should say, is going to be decided later this afternoon in a principal staff committee, where they're going to present these really high-level recommendations and make sure we're all on the same page before it goes to the Executive Council. So if this changes after this afternoon, follow up with me and I'll let you know what happens. But the point is, we have made progress and we're continuing to make progress together. But there's a couple places where we could do better, for certain. So we need to accelerate investments. We need to increase the speed and scale of money that's going into the work that we're doing. And the good news is there's a lot more money that's going into these programs right now based on federal funding increases and state level resources. But we need to target those resources to the outcomes that are really lagging. Like I said, forest buffers and wetlands are our priority. How can we make sure that those are the programs that we're really, really kind of boosting at this moment in time? Integrating emerging science and monitoring. You may have heard there's a lot of different reports that have come out to tell us how we're doing and what the gaps that we're seeing. There was a comprehensive evaluation of system response, the CSER report that's often talked about. There was a report on rising temperatures. What's the impact of climate change to our work? Those reports tell us a lot about the need to look at geographic targeting, to look at shallow waters where land meets water and where you can do you can make a lot of improvement in short order, potentially. Social science, we need to look at, are we considering social science in order to get behavior change? And looking at our monitoring network and understanding, is it robust enough? Can we do more to make sure that we're able to see the results of our actions and course correct when necessary? And then finally, fast-tracking the implementation of action plans. We have a lot of action plans already in the works, from watershed implementation plans to those forest buffers and wetlands plans, diversity and equity plans, climate resiliency plans. We need to invest in those plans and make sure that we're really fast-tracking their implementation before we even talk about what comes next. So that's all reaching 2025. That is what we have identified for how we get from where we are to where we want to be in 2025, recognizing that we're probably not going to hit the mark everywhere. So what happens beyond 2025? So that's a big question, and we were given another year to get to the Executive Council with more recommendations. So we've split this up into two phases because we probably won't have an entirely perfect, detailed product in 1 year with such big questions in front of us. So we've broken it into two phases. The first phase is by the Executive Council meeting in 2024. We're going to determine the scope and breadth of what will be undertaken to create that critical path forward for the partnership after 2025. And then we're going to develop a plan on how to complete that work. So what does the work entail, and how are we going to do it? We're going to use a steering committee in order to figure that out. And we have some contract support to help us as we figure that out. And then step 2 is execute that plan. You've written the plan, you're going to present it to the Executive Council. Hopefully they say, great, move forward, and we'll go forward. Your steering committee is made up of all the folks that are involved in the partnership day to day. So you have all the jurisdictions, the commission, the core federal agencies, the advisors to the program, the goal implementation teams. So those 10 goals that we have, they're split into 6 goal implementation teams. They're going to be part of this work. And then some stakeholder representatives that are going to help us really tackle what we need to do about partnership, largely external partnership, the folks outside of the day-to-day that we need to engage. And we tried to summarize our vision, our work for the steering committee in one sentence. The theory being, start simple, start with one sentence, and then build out from there, increase the complexity. So start with something that you can communicate to anyone, and then move from there. So what we are going to do is we are going to assess where we are and where we want to be in reaching our vision for the Chesapeake Bay and its watershed. And then we're going to identify the path forward that focuses on what we do and how we work. And each of those colorful boxes can be unpacked. So again, small words, but where we are, what have we as a partnership accomplished, given the theory of change that we currently follow, based on things like the Reaching 2025 report that we're going to have in hand, the CSER report, all these different reports that kind of tell us where we are in the gaps ahead. Where do we want to be? What's our vision for a healthy Chesapeake Bay and watershed, and how has that changed since we wrote the vision 10 years ago? A lot has changed in the intermediate time. Climate change, growth, all kinds of things. So is the Bay of the future that we envision for the future the same as the Bay of the past? The answer is probably no. So what is our Bay of the future? The path forward, this is the plan. We're writing the plan. Hopefully we're going to identify who's going to execute that plan, and the EC will move it forward. What we do, this is our approach to those goals and outcomes I mentioned. These goals and outcomes are how we're going to achieve our vision for the Chesapeake Bay. So do we have the right goals and outcomes in place? And are we able to impact those goals and outcomes? And how we work. How do we improve our partnership, our management, our governance, how we work together, how we meet each other each day to do this work? Are there things that we could change about how we partner together that gets us closer to our goal? So I won't go into all the details, but basically we took those questions and we turned them into elements of the final product. So when we deliver a report to the EC in 2024, hopefully we'll have some answers to those questions in the forms of recommendations on where to go ahead. So a summary of where we are, a vision for the Chesapeake Bay and whether that vision has changed since we last took a stab at it in 2014. Impact assessment, are we impacting our goals and outcomes? Are our goals and outcomes impacting our vision? Partnership assessment, how are we working together? Is that working? What could be done better? And then all of that will be smushed into some recommendations on that path forward. An important component of all of this is the public and stakeholder engagement. If we want to have a path forward with recommendations that have buy-in from the community, and we know we need the entire community's help in order to get us to our vision, we got to make sure they're part of the process in drafting this path and then in executing. So these are just some of the components of how we are building public and stakeholder engagement into that process. We've added those 2 at-large steering committee seats to the steering committee. We are circulating the meeting dates and materials, both to the steering committee members and to the public. So as soon as those steering committee members, you should be able to find them online, or if you sent us your email, we'll send them to you directly. We're ensuring that there are opportunities in every agenda of every steering committee meeting for the public to comment, and time for the steering committee members to respond to those comments. And that comment period is not just at the end of the meeting, it's throughout the meeting. So every time we hit a big decision point, or we move from one topic into another, we'll pause, we'll invite the folks that have been listening in to give us their thoughts, and we'll make sure that the steering committee members have time to respond to those thoughts if they'd like to. If we get public feedback between meetings, we'll share it. We'll make sure that the steering committee members see it. And we're going to be coordinating with network organizations in order to give periodic updates, kind of like this, and organize dialogue so that we can get feedback back. So make sure everyone knows the process that's moving forward, and then we get feedback on some of the decision points or the topical things that we're talking about, and we can make sure that that informs the conversation that's happening in the room and outside the room. Timeline, more small words, but the point is you can probably split it into 4 phases. The first phase, which we're closing out now in September, this is the the formation phase. So we have figured out our leadership, our deliverables, our roles, and hopefully soon our topics. What are the topical cross-cutting themes that we need to dig into and will help us find those recommendations? Our contract support, at the same time, they're going to be doing an independent evaluation. So we've spent some time kind of setting them up to do that independent evaluation, and now with this last meeting, they're going to be set on their course to kind of look at us from the outside and tell us how they think we're doing. October through December, we're going to be diving into those high-profile, cross-cutting topics, those issues that have kind of bubbled up in all of those reports. Teasing those out, talking about them, and hopefully looking for recommendations within. April through June of next year, we're going to be taking those conversations and turning them hopefully into recommendations. It's going to take some time. There's a lot of kind of layers of bureaucracy, you could say, that it has to go through in order to make sure everyone's on board. So that's going to take some effort. July through September, we're going to be reviewing what that independent evaluation says. We're going to be finalizing those deliverables that I spoke about, presenting that to all of the different levels of decision points in the program. So from us, it goes to the management board. From the management board, it goes to the principal staff. From the principal staff, it'll go to the executive council. So we have to get everybody on the same page and ready to elevate this to the signatories so they can take action from there. And then hopefully, October through December of next year, you'll see a product that is actionable, that has buy-in, that all of our signatories within the BAE program, all of the jurisdictions and agencies can come together and get behind, and that can kind of guide us into the future of what the BAE program looks like and gets us closer to our vision, whatever that vision may be, of clean water and healthy living resources for everyone in the watershed. And that concludes my big picture of what's going on at the BAE program right now. Happy to take questions for as long as you have me, and then if you'd like to follow up with me, please feel free. I'm all ears to any ideas and thoughts as we push forward with this important work.
Thank you. We do have a couple minutes. Wait, couple minutes? Yeah, there we go. We do have a couple minutes for questions. So are there any questions? Yes.
And it may be too early, but can you recall any positive contribution that Mr. Wheeler has provided in this effort?
So Director Wheeler is a member of the Chesapeake Bay Commission. So personally, he is an advisor to me as a member of our commission. I didn't mention this. I am one of the co-chairs of the Beyond 2025 Steering Committee, along with Martha Shimkin on behalf of the EPA. So my commission is providing guidance to me on my leadership in that effort and really to represent the commission in that effort. And so Director Wheeler, as a member of our commission, is one of my advisors, and then I pull that into my work in the steering committee.
Any other questions for Anna? Yeah.
Thanks, Anna. I'll just put you on the spot real briefly with maybe an easy question, or maybe somebody else in the room can answer. I don't know. But since this is a monitoring conference, do you ever see any future funding availability or thoughts towards getting some of that monitoring funding to locals instead of just the big picture Bay program monitoring efforts that are happening? Because funding is the hardest part for monitoring.
Right. It all comes down to resources at the end of the day and where those resources go. So I think I've heard in discussions, or at least the discussions to guide the future discussions, two things that kind of lead me to the conclusion that that will be a discussion point. One is I hear over and over the importance of resources and opportunities moving from the program itself and the the federal and state partners down into the localities and the local communities themselves that are so important, especially on land use decisions or monitoring. Make sure that money moves through, those resources move through, that capacity gets built in the future. And then 2, I think everyone recognizes the importance of monitoring. The Caesar report kind of showed the gaps that are in place between the actions we are taking and what we're seeing from the system. How is the system responding to these pollution reduction actions that we have put in place? There's a lot of information that we need to be able to make sure we're putting the right actions in place, that we understand the timeline for when those actions will deliver a response, and that we can make the right choices based on that information. And if you don't have a really strong monitoring program in place that allows you to dig into that level of detail, it's really hard to make the right decisions. So I think those 2 conversations will come together, and that will come up, and hopefully you'll help it come up in the steering committee discussions. We have one in the front.
Will Virginia change its laws around the menhaden fish and stop fishing?
I cannot speak to that. It'll be interesting to see what sort of legislation comes up, and we'll assess it as it does, if it does. But I can't conjecture about the future of menhaden legislation in Virginia at this time.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Anna.